Slow down. You're eating like a pig. She said it clearly, calmly, and loud enough for everyone at the Christmas table to hear. Then she added, smiling, "We don't want another scene tonight." My fork stopped in midair. The room went silent so fast it felt like someone had pulled the plug on the noise. I was 63 years old. It was Christmas. And my daughter-in-law had just decided to humiliate me in my own family, in front of my own son. I felt my hands shake as the mashed potatoes slid back onto the plate. I noticed that small detail because my body was trying to keep me grounded while my chest tightened. She laughed lightly, the way people do when they want cruelty to sound like a joke. No one laughed with her. My son stared down at his plate, his shoulders pulled inward, like he was bracing for impact. That was when I understood this was not about food. This was about power. I looked around the table. Her friends avoided my eyes. Her mother busied herself with the serving spoon, and my son said nothing. I quietly placed my fork down. "Excuse me." I said, steady enough to shock myself. "I need some salt." No one offered to pass it. As I stood, she watched me with that satisfied look people wear when they believe they have just established dominance. I walked into the kitchen and closed the door behind me. The smell of turkey and rosemary filled the room. The dishwasher hummed. Everything sounded warm and normal, which made the moment feel even colder. I leaned against the counter and took a breath. That comment was a test, and it wasn't the first one. By New Year's, I would understand exactly what she was planning, and it was bigger than an insult. Before I go any further, a quick note. This story is based on real experiences, rewritten with a few details changed for privacy. The visuals in this video are I created to match the mood. If this is not your kind of story, take care of yourself and rest well. But if it hits close to home, stay with me and leave a comment so I know you are here. I want you to picture it for a second. A holiday table, people smiling, plates full, and one person deciding right in the middle of it who deserves respect and who does not. That is why this matters, because humiliation in public is never just humiliation. It is a rehearsal. It is someone testing how much the room will tolerate. If you have ever sat at a table like that and felt your throat tighten, you already know what I mean. And if you have never experienced it, I pray you never do. But in my case, I walked back into that dining room with one thought I did not say out loud. If she can say that to me in front of everyone, what has she been saying to my son when nobody is watching? When I returned to the dining room, the conversation had moved on without me. She was telling a story about work, laughing loudly, holding court. Everyone nodded at the right moments. I sat down quietly. I focused on small things, the crease in the tablecloth, a drop of gravy near my plate, the sound of ice clinking in a glass. She leaned toward my son and said, "Some people just don't know when to stop." She did not say my name. She did not have to. My son's jaw tightened. He swallowed hard. He said nothing. If you are wondering why he stayed silent, let me explain something families like ours rarely say out loud. Silence does not always mean agreement. Sometimes it means fear. Sometimes it means you have been warned, carefully and repeatedly. What will happen if you speak? I had seen her punish him with days of cold silence over the smallest disagreement. I had heard those warnings myself. Just a week earlier, she had said to him, casually, like it was a joke, "If your mum keeps embarrassing me, maybe it's time we talk about other living arrangements." Other living arrangements. She said it while scrolling her phone, not even looking at him. That night, at Christmas dinner, she took it a step further. Dessert was being served when she leaned back in her chair and said, "Honestly, if things keep going this way, we may need professional help." Her eyes flicked to me. Someone who understands when a person can't take care of themselves anymore. The word hung there. Someone. My son stiffened. I felt a chill run through me. I knew she wasn't talking about my health. She was talking about my place. This was no longer about insult. This was about erasing me. She was planting a story. Slowly, publicly, carefully, old, dependent, a problem. She checked her phone, smiled at something on the screen, then flipped it face down when my son glanced her way. That small movement stayed with me. People who feel secure do not move like that. I glanced toward her father. He had stopped eating. He had heard every word, including the one she thought she could get away with. His hand tightened around his glass, knuckles pale. He was not smiling. He was watching his daughter the way a man watches a card game when he realizes someone is cheating. I did not know it then, but that look mattered. The night continued like nothing had happened. Laughter tried to return. Plates were cleared. Coats were gathered. I felt invisible. As people stood and drifted into the living room, her father rose and walked toward the kitchen. As he passed my chair, he paused. "You didn't deserve that," he said quietly. Then he straightened and walked away. That was the first acknowledgement I had received all night. I sat there with my hands folded in my lap, my heart pounding, and understood something that frightened me more than the insult itself. This dinner was not the end. It was the opening move. Later, as hugs were exchanged and goodbyes said, she smiled at me again, a polite smile, a warning smile, the kind that says, "You see how this goes?" My son avoided my eyes. I wanted to tell him I understood, that I was not angry with him, but I also knew something had shifted. If I stayed quiet, this would get worse. As the door closed behind the last guest, her father stopped in the doorway and looked at me directly, not with pity, with respect. He gave a single nod, and in that moment, I realized I was not imagining any of it. I was not weak, I was not confused, and I was not alone. The real question was not whether my daughter-in-law had crossed a line. The real question was how far she planned to go next, and whether she truly believed I would let her decide when my life was over. After everyone left that night, I stayed awake long after the house went quiet. I wasn't angry. I was thinking. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea that went cold, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the ticking of the clock on the wall. The kind of sounds you only notice when something inside you refuses to settle. I kept replaying the dinner in my head, not just the words she used, but the ease with which she used them. That kind of ease does not come out of nowhere. It grows, slowly, quietly, over time. If you had met my daughter-in-law when my son first brought her home, you would not have seen this coming. She was charming then, polite, complimented my cooking, asked about my work, told people how lucky she was to marry into a close family. Back then, I believed her. I wanted to. My son had always been gentle, the kind of boy who held doors open and apologized when someone else bumped into him. I worried about him sometimes, about the way he avoided conflict, but I told myself kindness would protect him. I was wrong about that. The changes were small at first. She would correct him in front of others, lightly, with a smile. She would finish his sentences, then laugh when he went quiet. She would say things like, "You know how he gets," as if explaining a child. I noticed I just did not name it yet. And when I did notice, I chose peace. That is what women my age were taught to do. Keep the family together. Do not stir things up. Do not embarrass anyone, especially not your son. So when he stopped calling as often, I assumed he was busy. When she began scheduling holidays without asking, I told myself times change. When he flinched slightly every time she spoke sharply, I told myself marriage is complicated. What I did not realize was that silence had already started doing damage. There was a moment, months before Christmas, that stayed with me. We were in the grocery store together, just the two of us. My son reached for a cereal he liked. She glanced at the price, then looked at him. "Do you really need that?" she said. He put it back without a word. And I remember thinking, if she can decide something that small for him, she can decide something big later. That night, I did something I am not proud of, but I will be honest about it. I listened for patterns, not secrets, patterns. When my son spoke, did she correct him? When he joked, did she shut it down? When he reached for a decision, did she take it out of his hands? And what I noticed was this: he started asking permission for things he never used to ask permission for. What time he should leave for work, which route he should drive, whether he should visit me, even what he should say when he called his own friends. Little things, quiet things. The kind of control people do not notice until it has already become normal. That is when fear turned into clarity for me, because I realized she was not just changing his schedule, she was changing his confidence. She did not raise her voice. She did not insult him. She just decided that was her pattern. By the time Christmas arrived, he had learned how to disappear without leaving the room. That night, after everyone left, I thought about how often she used the word embarrassing. Embarrassing when he disagreed, embarrassing when I spoke up, embarrassing when things did not go her way. It was always embarrassment she threatened. And embarrassment is powerful. It keeps people quiet. The next morning, I woke early, too early. The house was still dark. I made coffee and stood by the window, watching the street lights fade as the sun came up. My son walked in, rubbing his eyes. He looked tired in a way sleep does not fix. We did not talk about the dinner right away. We talked about weather, work, nothing. Then he finally said, "I am sorry about last night." He did not look at me when he said it. I told him I knew, and I did. What I did not tell him was that I was afraid, not of her words, of where they were heading, because insults are rarely the final step. They are preparation. Over the next few days, I paid closer attention, not in a dramatic way, just the way women my age do when something feels off. I noticed how she checked his phone when she thought he was not looking. I noticed how she spoke for him when people asked him questions. I noticed how often she talked about independence, but only for herself. Then there was the money, nothing obvious, just small things, a restaurant bill here, a weekend charge there, expenses that did not quite line up with the story she told. When I asked casually, she smiled and said, "Work stuff." She always smiled when she lied. I did not accuse. I did not confront. I observed. One afternoon, her father stopped by unexpectedly, so we sat at the kitchen table, the same one where I had sat alone after Christmas dinner. He did not mention the insult directly. He did not have to. Instead, he said, "She has always needed to win." I looked up at him. He stared at his hands for a long moment before adding, "And she does not like losing control." That was the first time anyone had said it out loud. I realized then that what I was dealing with was not just a difficult personality, it was a strategy. By the end of that week, I understood something else. This was not just about me being disrespected. This was about my son being reshaped. And once someone decides they are allowed to reshape another person, they do not stop on their own. They escalate, slowly at first, then all at once. That thought stayed with me as the days passed. I began writing things down, not dramatically, just dates, moments, words that stood out. I did not know yet what I would do with them. I just knew I would need them, because deep down I felt it. Something bigger was coming, and if I waited until it arrived to speak up, it would already be too late. Before we continue, if you are finding yourself in this story, even a little, I invite you to subscribe so you do not miss what comes next. These stories take time to unfold, and you deserve to hear how they end. Also, take a moment to check in with yourself. What time is it where you are right now? And where are you listening from? Leave it in the comments so I know you are here with me. And one more question for you to think about before the next part. When someone starts testing how much silence they can get away with, do you believe it is better to confront them early or wait until you have proof? Tell me which one you would choose, because in my case, that choice was already being made for me. And the next move was not going to be mine. After I started writing things down, I noticed how quickly patterns appear when you stop explaining them away. Nothing exploded. Nothing dramatic happened. That is what made it dangerous. It began with money, not big money, the kind that makes headlines, just small charges that did not quite match the story. A restaurant bill on a Tuesday night when she said she was working late. Another one 2 nights later. Always nice places, always just a little too expensive for a quick bite after work. I told myself not to jump to conclusions. Women my age have learned that lesson the hard way. So I waited. Then there was the phone. She used to leave it on the counter. Face up, notifications popping. Normal. Now it stayed in her pocket, always on silent, always face down. If my son walked into the room, she would turn slightly. Just enough. It sounds small when I say it out loud, but small things repeat, and repetition tells the truth. One afternoon, I was folding laundry when I noticed a scent I did not recognize, not her usual perfume. Something sharper, something new. I held the shirt for a moment longer than I needed to. Then I put it down and kept folding. Because if there is one thing women over 50 understand, it is this: you do not accuse without footing. A few days later, I was in the kitchen when a notification flashed briefly across her phone screen. Just a name. No message preview. I will not say the name here. What mattered was that it was not one I had ever heard her mention. She snatched the phone up so quickly she knocked her coffee over. She laughed it off. Clumsy me. I cleaned the spill while she watched me, smiling too hard. That night, my son came home late, later than usual. He said traffic. I nodded. Traffic is the oldest excuse in the book. The next morning, I checked the mailbox. Among the bills and flyers was a credit card statement. I was not snooping. The envelope had been misdelivered to my side of the house. I stared at it longer than I should have. I stood there, arguing with myself for a full minute before I made the choice. Then I opened it. The charges were not outrageous, but they told a story. Short trips, hotel bars, room service. Nothing that screamed an affair, everything that screamed a plan. I closed the envelope and placed it back exactly where it belonged. I did not mention it to my son. Not yet, because I was starting to see something else. This was not just about another person. It was about an exit. The way she talked had changed. She started saying things like when things settle down and after the holidays and once the new year starts. She talked about fresh starts, new chapters. She talked about independence more than ever, but never ours, only hers. One evening, she invited friends over. I watched her perform that version of herself everyone loved. Funny, sharp, put together. She told stories about my son that made him sound helpless. He cannot even decide what to wear without me. She laughed. Everyone chuckled. I did not, because jokes have direction, and hers always pointed the same way. Later, I overheard her on the phone in the hallway. She thought I was asleep. I only caught one sentence. After New Year's, it will be clean. She said it softly, relieved. I stood in the dark of my room, heart pounding, staring at the ceiling. Clean, that word stayed with me. Clean means planned. Clean means finished. Clean means someone thinks they have already won. The next day, her friend stopped by. They sat at the kitchen table drinking coffee, talking too loudly. I did not mean to listen. But my name came up. She is still around a lot. Her friend said. There was a pause. She is his mother. She replied, yes, but still. The way she said still made my chest tighten. I was not a person to her. I was an obstacle. That afternoon, I ran into her father at the grocery store. He looked tired. We talked about nothing important, weather, prices, the usual complaints. Then, as we were parting, he said something quietly, be careful. I looked at him. He hesitated, then added, she has a way of deciding things before anyone else knows a decision was made. That was the second warning. By then, I had stopped asking myself if something was wrong. I was asking how far along it already was. I began organising my notes, dates, charges, words she repeated. I kept it simple, not because I was building a case, because I was preparing myself. My son still did not know. He came home one night smiling. She had made plans for a weekend away, a surprise. He looked hopeful. I looked at her. She smiled back. I felt a strange calm settle over me, because when someone smiles like that, it is not about love, it is about timing. That night, as I lay in bed, I realised something that made my stomach drop. The dinner was not just about humiliating me, it was about seeing how much she could do in public. If she could speak to me that way in front of everyone, what was she already doing behind closed doors? And what was she about to do next? Because by then, I knew one thing for sure. She was not waiting to decide. She already had. And the next step in her plan was going to force me to choose between staying silent and stepping into a fight I had never planned to be in. Once I saw the pattern. I could not unsee it. She was not just preparing to leave. She was preparing the world. It started with small changes in the way she spoke to other people. It was always the same routine. She would start with a compliment about him, then slide in a concern. Ethan is such a good man. She would say, he means well. Then she would tilt her head and add, I just worry he shuts down, or he gets confused when there is pressure. She said it the way people talk about someone they are trying to protect, but it did not protect him, it replaced him. And the worst part was how natural it sounded to everyone else. They would nod, because who argues with concern? Who questions a wife who says she is trying? That is how she built her version of the truth. Not with lies that are easy to prove wrong, with soft sentences that are hard to challenge without looking rude. When friends asked how my son was doing, she sighed first. When family asked about work, she answered for him. When someone mentioned stress, she nodded a little too quickly. She began using words that sounded harmless on their own. Overwhelmed, sensitive, confused, words that did not accuse, but suggested, words that made people lean in and lower their voices. I watched it happen in real time. At a small gathering one weekend, Someone asked my son if he wanted another drink. Before he could answer, she smiled and said, "He should not. He gets emotional when he drinks." He laughed awkwardly. Everyone else laughed too. I did not, because that was new. Later that same evening, she pulled me aside in the kitchen. She did not raise her voice. She did not insult me. She said it gently, like a concerned adult. I worry about him sometimes. She said, "You know how fragile he can be." Fragile. I looked at her and realized something important. She was not speaking to me. She was speaking around me, planting words. By then, she had already decided what the story was going to be. The loving wife who tried, the overwhelmed partner who carried everything, the difficult husband influenced by his mother, and me, the overbearing presence who never knew when to step back. Once that story is told enough times, people stop asking questions. They start nodding. I saw it happen with her friends first, then extended family, then people I barely knew. Someone mentioned therapy at dinner one night. She nodded quickly. "We have talked about it." She said, "I just want him to get the support he needs." She said it kindly. She always said things kindly. My son shifted in his chair. He did not argue. He looked tired. That was when I understood the real danger. She was not trying to convince him. She was trying to document him, not on paper, in people's minds. The more she spoke about concern, the more she framed herself as reasonable, and the more silent he became, the more believable she sounded. I started hearing things secondhand. A neighbour asked if everything was okay at home. A distant relative suggested counselling. Someone joked about midlife crises. No one said her name. They did not have to. One afternoon, I ran into her friend at the pharmacy. We made small talk. Then she said, "She has been under so much pressure lately. I do not know how she does it." I asked, "Pressure from what?" She hesitated. "From everything." She said, "You know, I knew exactly what that meant. I was everything." That night, I sat alone and went through my notes again. Dates, comments, moments when she spoke for him. It was not dramatic. It was methodical. She was building a case without paperwork, and she was good at it. The next sign came when she began talking about space, not separation. Space, she mentioned it casually over breakfast. "Everyone needs room to breathe," she said, "especially when someone else is always around." She did not look at me. She did not need to. I realized then that she was not just pushing me aside socially. She was testing how easily I could be removed physically. Where would I go if she asked? Who would defend me? Would anyone? I did not confront her. I did not warn my son, because something told me that if I spoke too early, I would become part of her story, defensive, emotional, interfering. Instead, I watched and I listened. One evening, after a long day, her father stopped by. We sat quietly for a while. Then he said something that landed hard. She has always been good at explaining things in a way that makes people feel sorry for her. I nodded. He looked at me and added, "Even when she is the one causing them." That was when I knew this was not just happening to us. It was a pattern. The last straw came a few days later. She announced plans for after the holidays, not as a discussion, as a decision. "We are thinking of making some changes." She said, "Fresh start, clean slate." When she said clean, my stomach dropped because I had heard that word before. My son looked confused. She smiled at him. "Trust me," she said, "this will be better for everyone." Better. That word again. I watched him nod slowly, and I realized something that made my chest tighten. She was moving faster now. The dinner, the comments, the money, the story she was telling, they were all lining up. She was preparing to pull something big, and she was doing it with a smile that night. As I lay awake listening to the house settle, I understood the truth I had been avoiding. If I did nothing, she would decide everything, not just how the marriage ended, but how it was remembered, who was blamed, who was protected, and who was quietly erased. I did not know exactly what her next move would be, but I knew this. She was not waiting for permission. She was waiting for the right moment, and whatever she planned to do next was going to force the truth out into the open, whether she was ready for it or not. Once I accepted that she was not waiting for permission, I stopped waiting too. Not in a dramatic way. I did not confront her. I did not warn my son. I did not make speeches in my head anymore. I started preparing quietly. The first thing I did was simplify. I stopped guessing her motives and focused on her behavior, what she said, what she spent, what she repeated. I bought a small notebook and kept it in my purse, nothing fancy. Dates on the left, short notes on the right. Tuesday night dinner charge, Friday hotel bar, Sunday brunch when she said she was visiting a friend. No commentary, no opinions, just facts. Women my age know the power of facts. They do not shout, they do not argue, they sit patiently and wait for someone else to try to deny them. The second thing I did was stop explaining myself. When she made comments, I did not react. When she spoke for my son, I stayed quiet. When she hinted that I was always around, I smiled and excused myself. She noticed. People like her always do. She began watching me the way I had started watching her. That told me I was doing something right. One afternoon, my son came home early. He looked unsettled. He sat at the kitchen table and stared at his hands. "She is talking about space again," he said. I asked him what he meant. He shrugged, said she felt overwhelmed, said she needed clarity, said she thought maybe a short break would help. A break from what? He did not know. I asked him if he wanted one. He shook his head. Then I asked him something else. "Did she tell you this was your idea?" He did not answer right away. That pause said everything. I did not push. I told him I loved him. And then I did something that surprised even me. I asked him if he trusted me. He looked up. "Of course, Mom." I nodded. Then I told him I was going to take care of something. I did not explain what, because at that point, explaining would only scare him, and I needed him steady. That night, after she went to bed early, I stayed up and organized everything, statements, notes, dates. I laid them out on the dining table like puzzle pieces, not to accuse, to understand. The picture that formed was clear. She was creating a clean exit. She was managing perception. She was securing sympathy. She was positioning herself as reasonable, and she was doing it before making the final move. That is when I realized something important. If she believed she was ahead, it was because she thought no one was keeping score. The next morning, I made a phone call, not to a lawyer, not yet, to someone who knew her well, her father. I asked if we could talk. He did not hesitate. We met for coffee at a quiet place. Neither of them ever went. He listened without interrupting. I did not show him everything, just enough: dates, charges, patterns. He leaned back in his chair and sighed. "She has always done this," he said finally. "When she wants something to end, she rewrites it first." I asked him what he meant. He told me about old friendships, jobs she left, relationships she exited. Always the same story. She tried. They failed. He looked tired. Then he said something that changed everything. "She assumes you will stay quiet." I nodded. That was the mistake. From that point on, I made one decision. I would not expose her. I would let her expose herself. All I had to do was stay calm and let her move. And she did. A few days later, she announced plans for a family brunch after New Year's. Not a discussion, an announcement. She said it would be good to clear the air, start fresh. She invited everyone, friends, family, her parents. I smiled and said I would be there. She studied my face, searching for something. I gave her nothing in the days leading up to it. Ise. She became bolder. She talked openly about how hard things had been. She joked about needing a break. She spoke about independence again, always with that smile, always with an audience. I continued writing things down. I continued listening. I noticed she stopped hiding her phone as much. That happens when people think the end is near. They relax. The night before the brunch, my son asked me a question I had been waiting for. "Mum, are we okay?" I told him yes. But I also told him something else. Whatever happens tomorrow, listen more than you speak. He nodded. He trusted me. That trust was not something I took lightly. The morning of the brunch, I woke up calm, too calm. I made coffee and watched the sun come up. I thought about every woman I knew who had been pushed aside quietly, every mother who had been painted as difficult, every older woman who had been told gently that she was in the way. I packed my notebook into my purse, not because I planned to use it, but because it reminded me of the truth. By the time guests arrived, she was glowing, laughing, hosting, performing. She hugged me like nothing had ever happened. I hugged her back. I had no intention of going first, because people like her always do. And when they do, they forget who has been watching the whole time. As we sat down and she lifted her glass to make a toast, I felt something settle in my chest. This was it, the moment she had been preparing for, the moment she believed she controlled. What she did not know was that the story she was about to tell was already cracking, and the next words out of her mouth were going to decide whether she walked away clean or whether everything she had been hiding would finally come into the light. The brunch started exactly the way she wanted it to, bright, polite, controlled. But this time it wasn't a restaurant. She said it would feel more personal at her parents' place, more family, more honest. It was her parents' house, the kind of place where family photos watch you from the walls and everyone feels obligated to behave. She loved settings like that. They made her feel untouchable. She greeted people like a professional hostess, touching arms lightly, laughing at the right moments, moving the room with ease. My son stayed close to her side, quiet, watchful. I sat across from her father. He nodded at me when I arrived. Nothing more. I noticed she avoided looking at him for too long. That was new. When everyone was seated, she stood and tapped her glass gently. She did not rush. She liked the pause. "I just want to say how grateful I am," she began, "that we could all come together after such a stressful season." She spoke about growth, about honesty, about doing what is best for everyone. She said everyone a lot. My son looked confused. She smiled at him and placed her hand over his. I felt the room lean in. This was the moment she had been building toward. Then she did exactly what I expected. She sighed softly and said, "I have been carrying so much lately, trying to hold things together." She glanced around the table. "I know I am not perfect," she continued, "but I have tried. I really have." People nodded. Sympathy is easy when the story is smooth. She turned slightly toward me. "I think sometimes it is hard when boundaries are not respected," she said gently, "especially when family does not know when to step back." There it was, not an accusation, an implication. I did not react. I folded my napkin carefully and rested my hands in my lap. She continued, "I just want peace." she said, and clarity for both of us. She squeezed my son's hand. He did not squeeze back. She looked at him, just for a second. Then she turned back to the table. I felt something shift beside me. Her father leaned back in his chair. He did not interrupt. He waited. That is something men like him do when they are done being polite. She finished with a soft smile. "Thank you all for listening," she said. The silence that followed was heavy. She looked pleased. Then her father cleared his throat. He did not stand. He did not raise his voice. He simply spoke. "I have listened to you carefully," he said. She stiffened. He turned to my son. "You are a good man," he said. Quiet, steady. My son blinked, surprised. Then he turned to me. "And you," he said, "have been nothing but patient." The room froze. She laughed nervously. "Dad," she said, "this is not the time." He held up his hand. "I am not finished." He looked around the table. "What you just heard," he said, "is one version of events." Then he looked directly at his daughter. "It is not the whole truth." Her smile tightened. He continued, calm and measured. "You have been preparing people for a story. You have been telling it carefully, repeating the same phrases, choosing the right moments." She shifted in her seat. He did not look at her now. He looked at everyone else. "I have watched you do this before," he said, "with friends, with jobs, with people who no longer fit the picture you want." My heart began to race, not from fear, from relief. She tried to interrupt. "Dad, please." He turned to her. "No." That single word landed harder than anything else said that day. He turned back to me. "You have been watching quietly," he said, writing things down, not reacting. Then he smiled slightly. "That is how adults handle things." He paused. "From where I'm sitting, you're the boss." The word hung in the air. Boss, not victim, not obstacle, boss. My son stared at him. She looked stunned. I felt something settle in my chest that I had not felt in a long time. Validation. She recovered quickly. "Dad," she said, "you do not know what it is like living with this situation every day." He nodded. "You are right," he said. "I do not." Then he added, "But I know manipulation when I see it." Her face flushed. He turned to my son. "If there are issues in your marriage," he said, "you handle them honestly, not by rewriting people out of your life." My son straightened. For the first time that day, he spoke. "I have been trying to keep everyone happy," he said quietly. Her hand tightened around his. Her father watched the movement. "And that right there," he said, "is the problem." Silence fell again. She looked around, searching for support. No one spoke. Not her friends, not her mother. The story she had been telling had just lost its authority. She laughed again, a little too loud. "This is ridiculous," she said. "We are just having a conversation." Her father shook his head. "No," he said, "you were staging an ending. The brunch did not explode. It did not need to. Something else happened instead. People began to see, not everything, but enough." She sat back, crossed her arms, and went quiet. My son looked at me, really looked. For the first time in weeks, his eyes were clear. As people began to leave, conversations hushed and awkward. Her father stood. He placed a hand on my shoulder. "Do not say anything yet," he said softly. "Let her keep going. People like her always do." She watched us from across the room. Her eyes were calculating now, not confident. She knew something had shifted. What she did not know was how much. As we walked out into the afternoon light, my son stayed close to me. "Mum," he said, "I think something is wrong." I nodded. "Yes, I said, and it is about to come out, because when someone loses control of the story, they usually make one last mistake trying to get it back, and that mistake was already in motion after the brunch. Nothing exploded. That was the part that surprised me most. She did not scream, she did not cry, she did not accuse anyone on the spot. She smiled, a smaller smile than before, a tighter one. People like her rarely panic in public. They wait. That afternoon, my son drove us home in silence. The car felt heavier than usual, like the air itself was pressing down. When we pulled into the driveway, she was already there. She had beaten us home. That alone told me something. Inside, she moved around the house too quickly, straightening things that were already straight, opening cabinets and closing them again. My son sat at the kitchen table, rubbing his hands together. She spoke first. "Well, that was awkward," she said lightly. No one responded. She sighed. "I think your father embarrassed me today," she said to my son. In front of everyone, my son looked at her. No anger, no apology, just tired. I did not speak. I remembered what her father told me. Let her keep going. She poured herself a glass of water and leaned against the counter. "We need to talk about boundaries," she said. "About space." There it was again. Space. My son finally spoke. "What kind of space?" She shrugged. "Maybe you stay with your mum for a bit. Let things cool off." She said it like a suggestion, like she was doing him a favour. My heart tightened, but I stayed still. My son stared at her. "You want me to leave my own house?" She hesitated. "Just temporarily." Temporary has a way of becoming permanent. He stood up slowly. "No," he said. The words surprised both of them. She laughed softly. "Do not be dramatic." He did not sit back down. "I am not leaving," he said. "And my mum is not going anywhere either." Her smile vanished. That was the moment I saw it. Fear, not loud fear, calculating fear. She turned to me. "This is between us," she said. "You do not need to involve yourself." I folded my hands in my lap. "I am already involved," I said. "You made sure of that." She stared at me like she was seeing me clearly for the first time. That night, she slept in the guest room. The house felt different, quieter, sharper. The next morning, my son asked me to go with him somewhere. We drove across town to a small office building with a sign that did not stand out. A law office. I did not suggest it. He did. We sat in a waiting room with neutral chairs and outdated magazines, the kind of place where people come to make hard decisions. The attorney spoke calmly, asked simple questions, listened, explained options, nothing dramatic, no shouting, just facts. I was not planning revenge, I was planning protection, and protection is the kind of power nobody can argue with. When we left, my son looked lighter, not relieved, resolved. Over the next few days, he made small changes. He opened a separate account for his paycheck. He stopped sharing passwords. He documented conversations, not to punish her, to protect. She noticed immediately. She asked questions that sounded casual but were not. "Why are you so distant? Why are you acting strange? Who are you talking to?" He did not argue. He did not explain. He learned that silence can be strength too. Then she tried a different approach. She cried. Late one night, I heard her voice break through the wall. "I have given everything." She said, "I am exhausted." My son listened. He did not rush to fix it. The next morning, she acted as if nothing had happened. That is how I knew she was losing control. A week later, her father called me. She reached out to me. He said, asked for help. I asked what he told her. I told her the truth. He said that she created this. He paused, and that she should stop before she makes it worse. She did not stop. Instead, she escalated. She began telling people we were unstable, that the house felt tense, that she felt unsafe. She said it carefully, never in writing, always in conversation. I recognized the pattern. She was preparing her exit again, only this time the ground was not steady beneath her. One evening, my son came home holding an envelope. She froze when she saw it. "What is that?" she asked. He placed it on the counter. Information. She did not touch it. She did not need to. Her eyes told me everything. That night, I sat in my room and thought about how far we had come, from a Christmas dinner insult to this. I thought about all the women who never get to this point, who doubt themselves until it is too late. I did not feel proud. I felt clear. The next morning, she left early without saying goodbye. Hours passed. Then my son received a message. Just one line. "We need to talk." "I am ready." I looked at him. Ready for what? He exhaled slowly. For the ending, she thought she was controlling. But this time, she was not writing the script alone, and the meeting she had just requested was going to force her to choose between telling the truth or being exposed by it, because the evidence she did not think existed was already waiting, and it was about to change everything. She chose the place. Of course she did. A neutral restaurant, midday, plenty of people around, bright lights, no corners, the kind of place where she believed nothing ugly could happen. My son and I arrived first. We sat at a small table near the window. I placed my purse carefully at my feet. The notebook stayed inside. I did not need to look at it anymore. He kept glancing at the door. I could feel his nerves through the table. I reached over and placed my hand on his wrist. "Just breathe," I said quietly. She walked in, 10 minutes late. Hair perfect, makeup fresh, phone in hand. She smiled when she saw us, that familiar, polite smile she used when she wanted control. She sat down and placed her phone face up on the table this time. A performance. I noticed her eyes scanning the room, checking who might see us, who might listen. She started talking immediately. "I am glad we are doing this like adults," she said calmly. She talked about stress, miscommunication, feeling unheard. She said she wanted to clear the air. My son listened. I listened. She glanced at me once. Then she said it. "I think it is best if we separate for a while." She said, "I need space. I cannot live like this anymore." She exhaled as if relieved. I watched my son nod slowly. I thought about how many times she had rehearsed that line. She continued, "I do not want this to turn ugly. I just want what is fair." Fair. That word again. My son took a breath. He reached into his jacket and placed a folder on the table, not aggressively, just firmly. Her eyes flicked to it. "What is that?" she asked. He did not answer right away. He opened it. Inside were copies. Clean, organized, simple, dates, charges, receipts. Her smile faltered. He slid one page forward. "Can you explain this?" he asked calmly. She glanced at it and laughed. "That is nothing," she said. "Just work expenses." He nodded. Then he slid another page forward. Hotel charges, weekend dates, locations she had said she was visiting friends. Her jaw tightened. "You are invading my privacy," she said sharply. He did not react. Then he slid the final page forward. A timeline. Short, clear, impossible to misunderstand. She went quiet. The table felt very small suddenly. People at nearby tables glanced over. She lowered her voice. "You have no right to do this." she said. My son looked at her. I have every right to protect myself, he said. She turned to me. This is because of you, she said. You poisoned him against me. I met her gaze. No, I said. You underestimated him. That was the first time I spoke. Her eyes widened slightly. She had not expected that. She leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms. Fine, she said. If we are doing this, let us do it. She straightened. I have already spoken to an attorney. She said, I am prepared. My son nodded. So am I. That was when she realized something was wrong. Prepared people do not smile, but they calculate. She asked for the check early. She stood to leave. Then she said it, almost casually. I assume you will both be reasonable when this goes forward. Reasonable. I watched her walk away. She did not look back. That night, she packed a bag. She moved quickly, efficiently. She did not cry. She did not argue. She left before dawn. The house felt hollow. My son sat on the couch, staring at nothing. I sat beside him. We did not speak. The next few days were quiet, too quiet. Then the messages started, long texts, apologies mixed with accusations, offers mixed with threats. She wanted to meet again. She wanted to talk. She wanted to settle things privately. Her tone shifted with every message that told me everything. She was scrambling. Then came the call from her father. She is panicking, he said. She did not expect you to be ready. I asked what he meant. She assumed she controlled the narrative. He said, she assumed you would stay quiet. He paused. She did not plan for witnesses. The next meeting happened quickly. This time, there were attorneys. Everything slowed down. Everything became official. Her confidence shrank with every document. Her certainty faded with every question. She tried once more to paint herself as reasonable. It did not land. The story she had told too many times began to crack under its own weight. At one point, she looked directly at me. I wish you had stayed out of this, she said. I shook my head. You brought me into it. I said, I just refused to disappear. She looked away. The meeting ended without resolution. But something else had happened. She no longer held the upper hand. As we walked out, my son exhaled deeply. I did not realize how much I was holding my breath. He said, I nodded. Neither did I. That evening, as we sat in the living room, I felt something I had not felt since before Christmas. Peace, not relief, peace. But I also knew something else. People like her do not let go easily. They make one last attempt to win. And the next move she made was not subtle. It was desperate, and it was going to reveal more than she ever intended, because the truth has a way of coming out loudest when someone is trying the hardest to hide it. And when it came, it didn't just change the divorce, it changed who she could be in public ever again. And once that curtain fell, all I wanted was to get my son back and get myself back too. After everything settled, life did not suddenly become perfect. That is something I want to be honest about. There was no movie ending, no applause, no moment where everything felt light and easy all at once. What there was instead was quiet, real quiet, the kind that lets you hear your own thoughts again. The house felt different after she left, not empty, clear, like a window had finally been opened after years of stale air. My son moved slowly at first, like someone learning how to stand on a leg that had been asleep for too long. He questioned himself. He replayed conversations. He wondered if he had been too harsh. I watched him and I said nothing, because healing does not happen when someone else rushes you through it. It happens when you feel safe enough to sit with the truth. For me, the biggest change was internal. I realized how long I had been shrinking myself without even noticing. I had softened my voice, shortened my visits, measured my words, not because anyone asked me to directly, but because I had learned that peace was easier when I took up less space. That realization stayed with me. Here is something personal I want to share. I used to believe that being a good mother meant enduring quietly, that love meant patience without limits, that dignity meant staying silent even when you were being erased. I do not believe that anymore. I believe dignity is knowing when silence protects you and when it destroys you. I believe love does not require self-disappearance. I believe patience without boundaries is just another word for neglecting yourself. There were nights after everything ended when I sat alone with a cup of tea and thought about the moment at that Christmas table, the fork, the mashed potatoes, the silence. I realized something important. That moment did not break me. It woke me up. If I had defended myself loudly that night, I might have been dismissed as emotional. If I had confronted her early without clarity, I might have played into the story she was building. Instead, I waited, I observed, I chose my timing, and that made all the difference. One of the hardest lessons I learned is this: you do not need to convince everyone of your truth. You only need to protect it. There will always be people who misunderstand you on purpose. There will always be people who benefit from you staying quiet. Your job is not to educate them. Your job is to make sure they no longer get to decide your place. Another lesson I want to leave you with is about age. Somewhere along the way, society teaches women that getting older means getting quieter, that wisdom means retreat, that grace means tolerance of disrespect. I reject that. I think age gives you clarity. It gives you perspective. It gives you the right to say, I have seen enough to know when something is wrong. If you are listening to this and you have ever felt pushed aside gently, if you have ever been labelled difficult when you were simply paying attention, if you have ever doubted yourself because everyone else seems so calm, I want you to hear this clearly. Your awareness is not the problem. It is your strength. I also learnt something important about control. People who need to control others are often terrified of being seen. That fear makes them strategic, polite, convincing, but it also makes them sloppy eventually, because control requires constant effort and truth only requires time. I did not win because I was louder. I won because I stayed steady. I stayed observant. I stayed grounded in reality. That is something anyone can do. You do not need money. You do not need power. You need clarity and patience and the courage to stop participating in your own erasure. My son and I talk differently now, not perfectly, but honestly. He learned something too. He learned that love does not mean absorbing someone else's chaos. He learned that boundaries are not punishments. They are invitations to healthier relationships. He learned that silence can protect you, but speaking at the right time can save you. As for me, I learnt to trust myself again. I learnt that my instincts were never wrong. I just ignored them for too long. If I could go back and tell my younger self one thing, it would be this: pay attention to the small moments. They tell you the truth long before the big ones do. I want to ask you something now. Have you ever looked back at a moment and realized that was the beginning, not the ending, just the beginning? If so, What did you do next? Did you speak up? Did you wait? Did you wish you had trusted yourself sooner? There is no wrong answer. There is only awareness. If this story resonated with you, even in a small way, please take a moment to like this video. It helps these stories reach the people who need them. And if you want to hear more stories like this, stories about reclaiming dignity, setting boundaries, and choosing clarity over comfort, consider subscribing to the channel. We are building a quiet space here for people who have lived long enough to recognize truth when they hear it. Before you go, I want to check in with you. What time is it where you are right now? And where are you listening from? Leave it in the comments. I read them, and I care. One last question to think about. If you knew that staying quiet would cost you yourself, what would you choose instead? For me, the choice came late, but it came in time, and my life is better because of it. Your voice matters. Do not forget that.